Welcome new and old friends. My name is 2482, and today, 2 got us 8 true creepy encounters from Reddit. So, turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. Time of death, 8:23, called the paramedic as I lay in the back of an alley with my throat sliced open. I woke up from my nightmare to see a message from my date reading, "Are we still on for 8 tonight?" Guy chased us home. By Unhinged Woman 777. Last year I was going out for drinks with my friends, but since I had to go to uni the next day, I only stayed till around midnight. My boyfriend promised to pick me up and go home with me, because I don't like taking the subway alone at night, but since I was pretty drunk by then, it took me a little bit to walk out of the pub. Unfortunately, we had to wait for the night bus, with multiple stops, since the subway closes on the weekdays at night. For context, my boyfriend and I don't live together, but very close to each other, around a 15 to 20 minute walk distance. Both areas are pretty shitty. He lives near a train station, many crackheads, homeless, sketchy people around, and I live in a cheap, bad district with a high crime rate. My building has 2 entrances on 2 different streets because it's a corner building site leading to a patio and then to an apartment building and its doors. To get into my apartment, I have to open 3 doors. I usually use the entrance door that is nearer to the subway and on the side of my apartment. We had to take 2 buses to go home. One drove us to the train station, and the next one from the train station to my apartment. After getting out of the first bus, we realized that we'd have to wait for 20 minutes or something for the second bus to come, and since I had to sleep at home, class the next day, I didn't want to stay at his place. My boyfriend didn't want to wait, so he persuaded me to walk instead of taking the bus, which sober me would have never done. But since I was still drunk and didn't care how I got home, so I agreed. So we started to walk home and passed a few sketchy people, mostly people smelling of drugs, etc. But nothing really bad. Then I saw a guy walking in our direction, and I somehow got a bad feeling, so I told my boyfriend that I wanted to change to the other side of the street because I didn't want to walk past him. Suddenly the guy yelled, "Hey!" as if he wanted to ask us something, but we ignored it and continued to walk. He got louder and louder until he started to yell. I could see from the corner of my eye that he was coming over, so I whispered, "Run!" to my boyfriend, took his hand and ran the fastest I could while he was chasing us. We ran and ran and ran, and then made a turn to the right, the street where I lived, and hid. It seemed like he was gone, so I took my keys out and started running towards my building, taking the other entrance of my building that I normally don't use. As I was trying to open the door, my boyfriend started panicking, throwing me inside the patio and closing the door aggressively, and then pushing me to the building. He explained that the guy came running around the other side of the street, meaning he took a shortcut, probably thinking we were going to run to the subway/bus stop. If we had taken the other entrance, he would have clearly been the faster one. Being in shock, we unfortunately didn't call the police, which I regret. I stopped going out for drinks/clubbing for half a year after this and slept at my boyfriend's place for 2 weeks because I was scared that he would come back. I think the worst thing about this is that he really wanted to get to us for whatever reason. I still want to know why he chased us for so long. 2 weeks later, a girl a few streets away was essayed in front of her building by a guy who chased her home. I wonder if it was the same guy or just a coincidence. I never thought I'd ever want to hear anyone scream or cry in pain. But that soon changed after I realized that my car was upside down and my toddler was silent. I was kidnapped as a child by my father, by babyyodasnuggies. Hi Reddit. Today I wrote this as a 36-year-old man. You'll have to bear with me, as the details of the story are vague and a blur, but I will share what I remember. In the summer of 1993, I was in first grade. My parents had been divorced for many years, with my mother having sole custody. As a child, I barely remember my father, but he would make his brief appearances or send gifts on Christmas or my birthdays. Seeing my father always made me happy, as I was far too young to comprehend the complexities of a battered relationship or marriage. After school one day, I was shocked to come outside and see my father waiting for me. My grandmother usually picked me up from school, but never my father. He had a small black car, a beater. He always seemed to dress nice, suspenders and slack, hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. I remember getting into his car and smelling what I now know as an adult to be clove. I later gathered that he had a habit of rolling his own cigarettes and gained that he must have been in a clove phase. There is a gap in time, and now it's nighttime, and I'm watching the fluorescent lights from miscellaneous stores fly by my passenger seat window. A gas station I can't remember, Brim's ice cream at an intersection, and more time loss. I'm now running around with another kid in and out of yellow-lit apartment corridors. Some doors are open and we go into one. There are kids in a back bedroom playing Sega. I watch as Sonic zips through loops and listen to familiar music that momentarily makes me feel safe. I suddenly realize I'm very alone with the complete strangers and find my way back outside. Another gap. My belly is full from being burritos, and I look down a very dark hallway in my father's apartment. I'm standing next to an aquarium, giving blue ambient light that sits on my face. I want to go home. Something doesn't feel right. In an attempt to comfort me, my father gives me a toy flashlight that projects the Batman symbol. I shine it down the black hallway. The cheap plastic of the switch fidgets and stubbornly slides clicks on and off. My father is on the phone and he's upset, voice raised. I apologize for not knowing what happened next, but I can confidently say I was safely returned by my father. My mother had no idea where he lived, and we would sometimes drive around at night in an effort to find the mentioned landmarks to trigger my memory. I hadn't thought much about this until tonight, and it really made me feel wrong and uncomfortable. As you may have guessed, I do not have a relationship with him. Please stop being so loud. I need complete silence to concentrate, said the doctor, as I screamed my lungs out during my autopsy. A Child from Imagination by Anonymoose. Okay, so I don't know how accurate the story will be, so here it goes. So I live in a residential area which has few people. That's why the area in which I live is not well known. So this is back when I was 10 years old, and it was a usual day, and I was sitting outside my house on the chair looking at the clouds or something. That's when I did something weird. I began to scream, "Hey!" into nothingness. I do not know what motivated me to do this, but I kept on doing this until I got a response from the other side of my house. The voice replied back saying, "Hi." And I got up from my chair and saw a girl about my age just standing there on the sidewalk looking at me. She was wearing a black dress and had straight black hair. We began yelling things back and forth across the street, which, now that I think about it, was pretty weird. Here's when the story gets hazy. The thing about 10-year-old me is that I was an incredibly shy and introverted person. I only spoke when I was spoken to, and otherwise, I kept to myself most of the time. But this time, it was like I was a different person. Somehow, and I don't know how, but I managed to invite this girl into my house, which I had never done before. Keep in mind, this was a girl I had never seen before, which made this even more confusing. I remember my mom also seeing her and inviting her in without any hesitation. I remember we went to my room, and I clearly remember us reading a book about ladybirds. We drew for a bit, and then she said she was going home because it was getting dark. After she left, my mom laughed and said that she was happy that I made a new friend. After that, I never saw the girl again. I went out and yelled like I did, but I never got a response. I was confused and I didn't let that bother me much. Later, when I asked my mom about it, to my horror she said, "What girl?" And I told her about the girl who lives across the street. She stared at me for a moment and said, "There is no girl your age across the street. The people who live there are a family of 3 who just had a baby." I never really thought about this story before, but ever since watching many videos on horror stories made me think about this supernatural experience. This sounds like it came straight out of a movie. What intrigues me is that, did I conjure up this girl simply out of boredom? Was she a spirit? If so, how did my mom acknowledge her and forget about her the next day? I guess there are some things that we never find out. "Come on, buddy, let's go," I said to my son after pointing out the crickets on our camping trip. "We need to keep moving," my wife mouthed as she checked the Geiger counter hidden in her jacket. Pretty sure I met a serial killer in Tampa, 2017. By Adventurous Drive 69. I was living in Tampa, Florida in 2017, right when there was a serial killer announcement. The news reported they caught the guy a few weeks later, but to this day, my gut tells me they got the wrong guy. So, here's my story. It was April 20th, 2017, so you know what I was doing, and a lot of it. But keep in mind at this point in my life, I was constantly stoned for 7 years. Weed didn't affect me in the same way. My boyfriend at the time and I agreed to start the night at different friends' houses, since his friends didn't smoke and mine did. Topped with the fact that I was about to move to a different state, and it would be the last time we would see my friends for a while. So, around 10 to 11 p.m., I would take an Uber to get to his friend's house. The night was highly normal up to this point. So, I order the Uber, and the Uber driver drops off my other friends at their houses along the way. So, being the person I am, I strike up a conversation for the 30-minute ride. "How are you doing? Are you seeing a lot of high people tonight?" My normal questions. I hate silence, and this is who I am as a person. After we get through some small talk, he starts asking me where I was going, and I explained everything above. Asked me why I'm not partying with my boyfriend at the time, and my dumbass explains, "I'm not sure if we're going to make it with the move, and he doesn't love me anymore." And then he starts to ask me if my mom knows where I am, if people know I'm coming, and when do those friends he just dropped off expect me home? Do I live with them? And thankfully, I caught on that these were weird questions to ask someone traveling alone. So I started lying, saying my mom was expecting me to call her as soon as I arrived, and how I was going to text in the group chat to tell them when I was at the other party safe. Once we arrive, of course, like a horror movie this night was feeling like, the other friend's house was in the woods at the edge of Tampa. And my high ass was in overdrive trying to figure out how I was going to get out of this. We can finally see my friend's house and a little bonfire about 300 feet away when he stops and says this is where he will drop me off. I ran out of that car ASAP and he hightailed it out right as I closed the door. Thank God I didn't leave anything in the Uber. I know it's not the craziest encounter, but my gut is rarely wrong about these things. I didn't think about this again until I saw the news, when they announced that they had caught the guy. I don't know. Hope this was worth being late to work to type out. As I see the drunk woman being carried away by her friend, I sigh to myself, being glad I didn't give her the drink she ordered when she already looked tipsy. What the hell is an angel shot anyway? Chased Through the Woods by a Man by Height Physical. This occurred around 1999/2000. My best friend and I were avid outdoor adventurers and amateur pot growers. We would frequently find secluded places in the woods that allowed us ample light and shade for plants to grow, and that would not allow them to be easily found. One particular day, we went to an annex of trails located near NJ State Park Trail System. The trails weren't in the park, but I had hiked them before and knew they weren't that frequented. We went out that day with our seeds partially sprouted in the moist paper towels. We parked the car at the trailhead and started hiking in. We covered a mile or so and then ventured off the trail and into the woods. We found a clearing, planted the seeds, and tied a few barely visible ribbons off to mark the way to the plant spot to check them in the future. My friend and I got back on the trail and started walking back to the car, when my friend noticed a man in the other direction just staring at us. He was probably in his 30s or 40s, bald head, normal clothes. We didn't think anything of it for the most part, but we definitely kept looking back as anyone would when someone's behind them in the woods. We saw that he was walking 60 plus or so feet behind us. It seemed weird, but it was probably more so due to us having anxiety that we planted seeds. We picked up the pace, but the man also picked up the pace. We weren't gaining any distance. At one point, we decided to get off the trail and let him pass. We turned off the trail and walked into the thickest of sticker bushes, which I remember vividly getting shredded on. We got deeper into the woods and heard cursing. When we turned around, the man was coming through where we entered. It was at that moment we actually became scared. Mind you, we were two young, strong 19-year-olds, but a man following you into the woods is damn creepy. We kinda made a U-maneuver to outflank him and come out to the woods further down the trail. Once on the trail, we ran. As we were running, there was a fork in the trail and my friend went right and I went left. I realized my mistake as my buddy was going down the correct path and I wasn't. So I turned around and started running back towards the fork to follow my friend. As I was running towards the direction we came from to get to the fork, I could see the man running towards me down the trail. He was a distance away, but not far enough in my eyes. Survival mode kicked in and I ran as hard as I could. I caught up to my friend who was walking at this point. I screamed, "He's after us!" And we both booked it all the way to the car. We got in the car shaking and out of breath. We backed up and started to get out of the parking lot when the man appeared at the trailhead. He stopped there and just stared at us as we drove away. I always wonder what that was all about. Did he want to kill a couple 19-year-olds? Was he also doing something illegal in those woods and wanted us gone? My buddy and I still laugh and talk about it to this day, 22 years later. As they knew the cow was soon to give birth, they called upon the local vet to help with any potential problems. Nearly shoulder deep inside the animal, the vet tried to find the legs of the calf, only to grab hold of a human hand. Tried to Follow Me Home by A. Debauchery. Last night I went to the auto parts store because my car decided to stop working. Thank God it was my weekend. I saw the price of the part and had to come back to get Aftergain the funds. Went back and picked up the part I needed. It was around 9:30 p.m., so it was dark out. I was paying for my things and an employee from the store, had a company shirt on, was saying bye to the cashier helping me. The cashier said, "Thanks for coming by," and the guy left. After some small talk with the cashier, I paid for my part and dipped out. Headed to my car parked right outside the door, and the other employee said something I can't recall. He asked for my name, gave a shortened version. I looked at his name tag, said his name, and shook his hand because he was going in for the shake. He said I was really cute and told him I appreciated that, and we got in our cars. Parked right next to each other, with a spot in between. He started backing out while I looked behind me before doing the same. Looked to the right, clear, then to the left and saw a dude looking over his shoulder, breaking his neck, staring at me. I was surprised and uncomfortable, so I snapped my head back and acted like I went to look at my right shoulder again. He pulled out the lot without, I pulled out and was behind him. He didn't put his blinker on to turn, but when he pulled to the main road, he put his hazards on and stopped at the right side of the road. I thought, is this MF going to follow me right now? Took note of what his car looked like, color, type of car, distinct stickers on the bumper, just in case. I pulled out, passed him, checked my rearview mirror, and he was still there with his hazards. So I was like, nah, just being paranoid. Then he started driving. He was quite a ways behind me, but eventually came up closer. Still didn't think too much. He drove past me on the passenger side, 2 lanes, and I kept my eyes forward because I'm not looking at this dude after that weird shit he did in the lot. Thankfully, this was right before a light where the 2 lanes merged into one and he passed me and got in front. I was still behind him, but for safety purposes I turned right at the next light so to go on a different road in an opposite direction of my home. Didn't want someone to know the general location of my house because I'm outside all the time. Mind you, the auto parts store is like 7 minutes from my house. As I make the right, this dude puts his emergency lights on again and pulls to the side of the road. There wasn't a parking lot for him to turn and follow me, thank God. But I kept driving, checking my rear view, seeing if he'd pop up, and thank God he didn't. I was afraid he would see me driving across the main road to get to my house because we started on the main road, but thankfully not. Been keeping an eye out for his car and him since then, since I live so close to the store. Told my boyfriend about it and described the car just in case. Hopefully I don't see this guy around. Thankfully, I was using a family member's car who lives about 15 minutes away, so he doesn't know what my personal car looks like. The shopkeeper nodded and dialed the phone, as the blood-stained girl frantically explained how she had escaped from her pursuers, injuring herself in the process. As he slid her a can of soda and motioned for her to take a seat at the side of the store, he whispered quietly into the phone, "She's here. Thinks I'm calling the police." followed by a creep all night. By just a name, yeah? Hey, I feel weird as this is my second post in the sub. Not sure why, but that's whatever. Okay, so I, 26 male, have been kinda seeing this girl from work, 27 female, on and off for maybe a little over a month. It's still kinda early and we haven't defined anything about our relationship, but we do go out, or at least communicate in person a few times a week. We're in different apartments, so I don't get to see her as much as I like. So when I do get the chance to be alone with her, I like to seize the opportunity. So we went to a local festival and met up with some friends. All was fine at the beginning of the night. Then when I went to get her something to drink from one of the vendors, I took notice she was talking to a guy. I'm not so insecure that this bugged me, but I did walk over to her and make my presence known. She introduced me to the guy whom she just met, and he didn't even acknowledge my existence. He just looked at her and said it was nice to meet her and then walked away, basically shunning me with his eyes. After she got tired of the festival, she asked me to take her to get something to eat. We went over to the bar and grill type establishment, where we met up with another couple we work with. Lo and behold, as soon as we get our drinks, the same guy walks in. He sits at the bar, in a seat that was really close to her. She was also able to confirm that it was the same guy. Now I feel bad about this because the two that we met up with made a few jokes at his expense, but it seemed to be based more in nerves rather than trying to humiliate the guy. We made one final stop for the night after eating, and that was to get female hygiene products for her. As we were shopping at the pharmacy, the same exact guy walks in, but this time he gives me a very malicious smile. Dude gave me total serial killer vibes. As she's looking for her tampons, I'm like an owl over her looking at a magazine. He just came up right behind me and stared. I tried to keep my cool and play it off as best I could. When he started to make me sufficiently uncomfortable, I started making my way over to her. After she checks out, we both leave and he decides that he's done shopping as well. I knew at this point that this guy was following us. 3 times isn't a coincidence. She had made mention that he was following behind us. I held her wrist and guided her over to my vehicle. As I unlock the car, he approaches her and says, "Excuse me, but is this jerk bothering you?" I couldn't believe what I actually just heard. She assured him that she was in no danger. I hate having to say this, but I figured this guy wouldn't take a hint without being direct. I told him to leave her alone and to go away. He once again made no eye contact with me and just looked at her. He looked at her almost like trying to look into her soul and said, "Why don't you leave this loser and come with me?" He grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her closer to him. She pulled back, but he didn't let up. I stepped between them and shoved him backwards. He bit his bottom lip like he was so enraged in such an instant. He lunged at me, but I caught him before he made contact and knocked him to the ground. He reached into his pocket, which is where I stopped playing around entirely and kicked the crap out of him with one kick while he was on the ground. I got her in the car and we drove the hell out of there. I drove her to my house where she stayed with me for the night. I didn't want to drive her to her house and risk that creepy individual following her there. I felt better with her at my place. She mentioned wanting to file a police report, though neither of us have done that yet. She is okay. She is shaken up, but she seems to be holding up fine. I like to think this guy had no malicious intent. I like to think that he actually was looking out for her safety, and maybe he was reaching into his pocket for his cell phone or something. I'm not an idiot though. This guy seemed to have some serious problems. And for the record, I don't in any way condone violence of any kind, but I think in this case it was justified. When it comes to protecting someone like her, I'm not taking a chance. Anyways, that's what's happened. Still not sure what to make of it entirely. And I'd be lying if I said this incident and this guy hadn't been on my mind. Water dripped onto my face from the fountain of youth above, slowly but steadily rejuvenating me with energy and life. But as the tight walls of the cave kept my body from moving even an inch, I only wish for death that will never come. Public Transit Disaster by Anime is Waifu 312. Hello everyone. I wanted to share my scary encounter that occurred just yesterday on the bus. Features leering and verbal harassment. So for a bit of context, I'm a college student. Without giving too many details, I'm a woman on the smaller size of average female height. I currently do not have a car, so I use a bike, walking, and a bus to get around. My college has a transit service that allows you to scan in with the student boarding pass for free. Other non-students are allowed to ride the bus by paying upon entering or purchasing a ticket beforehand. I frequently ride the bus for various reasons, grocery runs, or treating myself to food. And yesterday I had the idea of treating myself to a movie after all the exams I have been having lately. I'm an avid horror fan and knew that Terrified 2 was in theaters, so of course I wanted to see it immediately. One of my friends told me they found it funny and really enjoyed it, which was more than enough reason to go see it. Side note, it was good and hilarious, but if gore is not your thing, I do not recommend it. I was looking at tickets the day before yesterday and trying to decide which time slot I wanted to see the movie in. Looking back now, something in my gut told me to choose the earlier time. I wish I had listened. Another detail I want to add is that there are two bus sizes, a large one and a small one. The bus I rode during the incident was the smaller one. The stop where I got on the bus is the beginning of the route. Unlike every other stop, the driver usually parks the bus here for 5 minutes and gets off to use the restroom, or have a quick break before continuing with the rest of the route. Upon entering the bus, I noticed that only 2 other passengers, another girl about my age, and an older man. The girl was in the front of the bus on the right side, and the man was in the second row on the left side. I sat on the right side several rows back. I usually read something on my phone or listen to music on the bus, so I immediately got on my phone when I sat down. Everything was okay for a little bit until I looked up and noticed the man repeatedly staring at me and looking away before staring at me again. I was immediately apprehensive, but just brushed it off. He started speaking aloud out of nowhere, saying things like, "Beautiful baby," and "so damn fine." While staring at me, I was frozen out of fear and could only keep looking at my phone and trying to ignore it. This continued until I worked up the courage to say, "Sir, would you please stop staring at me?" To which he claimed he was not staring and told me I was extremely beautiful. Unsure what to say, I just stupidly thanked him and went back to my phone. He had his body slightly turned, but when I confronted him, he faced fully forward. The driver got back on and we started moving again, so everything was calm for a bit, though I was admittedly still shaken up. This calm did not last long. Obviously, this creep couldn't contain himself and just had to voice his opinions about me out loud. He started saying similar things again, but also added some new phrases such as, "Gonna make you my wife," and by far the worst one, "I'm gonna get you pregnant." I was shaking at this point and was unsure what to do. I desperately wanted to sit next to the other girl, but did not want to pass him to sit by her. We made it to 2 more stops before the girl got off and said sorry before leaving. My heart dropped to my stomach. The last thing I wanted was to be alone with this guy. Luckily, more people got on at this stop. A middle-aged couple and a guy about my age. In a panicked voice, I sort of shouted and asked that guy my age if he would like to sit with me. He was a bit confused but came to sit by me, and I immediately felt relief. The stress of the situation got to me, and I broke down crying. I guess the creep took this as an indication to leave because he swiftly made his exit after that. The kind younger guy who sat down next to me and began to comfort me. I am so grateful he chose to ride the bus that day. The bus driver noticed the commotion and called me to the front to get information in order to make a report. He told me he couldn't hear anything, but the buses have video and would hopefully pick up what the creep was saying. He told me the same man had recently been kicked off for a similar incident and that he would be reporting this immediately. For the rest of the ride, the young guy and I talked about things like majors and other school-related stuff. I wanted to go into marine biology field, and he's a graduate student from mechanical engineering. I made it to the movies, it was awesome, and back home safely. But I definitely learned a lesson. My boyfriend is going to help me look into some self-defense items, and he taught me a few fighting techniques. I'm still shaken just writing this. I'm actually really afraid to leave my room right now. Sometimes it's easy to forget that creepy encounters with weirdos can happen at any time. They aren't just stories on the internet. I can't believe how amazing the view from the top of the mountain was. I had such intense goosebumps that even my hair on my head was standing on end. And with that, our time is coming to an end together. As always, I would like to thank the writers who let me read their stories. I hope you all stay safe, and the one that was late for work, I hope you didn't get into too much trouble. A creepy encounter can lead to a great story to tell, but a terrifying time at the moment. If you take anything from this video, please remember 2 simple rules. Trust your gut, and never hesitate to be rude to get yourself out of danger. I wanted to say sorry, my voice isn't exactly at 100% yet, and some stories are worse than others due to my voice cracking more. But, hey, you got some creepy encounters from it. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, think about subscribing and turning that pretty little bell to all notifications. If you'd like to help, share this channel/podcast with anyone who might enjoy it. It seriously helps. If you'd like to help in other ways, I do have a Patreon and memberships on YouTube. For $1 a month, you get early access to all the audio. Oh, and a bonus story every week. If you'd like to get something with my avatars on it, I do have merch as well. And if you want to buy me a coffee, I have PayPal. All the links are down below, and none of this will be ever expected, but always appreciated, guys. Last, but never least, I would love a comment. But let's get you that Sunday word first. On screen right now is everyone who left me a comment, well, 2 weeks ago. Thank you guys as always. I seriously look forward to comments. Now, on to this Sunday's word, which I kinda just wanted to go with something goofy. So let's go with kick. You know, to kick something. So, if you're on YouTube, write me a sentence down below using this word and you'll be next week's photo. If you're on the podcast or somewhere else, you can go to Twitter, @me, and use this word, and you'll be next week's photo as well. As long as Twitter is still up and running, that is. But as always, guys, thank you for watching and listening. I really never thought I'd see this many subscribers. It's mind-boggling and amazing, because I truly love doing this. Sleep tight, and don't let 42 bite.